time.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the February 28th School Board of Manatee County Workshop. I want to officially call this particular portion of the workshop into order. We have one item for this afternoon, and that's the Citizen Financial Oversight Committee, or the CFOC's annual report to the board. So, bless you. Thank you. Go ahead and give it over to the chair and let you go ahead.
Because if I don't, I will ramble and you guys will be screaming squirrel.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Nope, see, here we go. Squirrel.
Yeah. Yeah, public comment. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Forgot about the public comment. It was behind my other sheet, this sheet.
Oh, we do have a public comment?
So, sorry, Ms. Harrigan. Yes, we have one public comment, and that's Loyal Shannon, is it Young? Jung. Come on up. You'll have 3 minutes. Up above is the ticker.
Won't take that long.
Okay.
My name is Shannon Jung. I am here today representing Stream, and one of our concerns this year and last is youth mental health, and we are talking to school board members and school officials about that. We're delighted that Dr. Breslin has coordinated the many different departments of the school and is helpful in talking to us. We are distressed at the high ratios of student counselors, social workers, and psychologists to students in the Manatee County schools. We understand that counselors frequently serve in auxiliary sorts of services, such as coordinating testing. I have a son who is a junior in college, monitored SAT scores and students, so I'm not sure what goes on into certifying a testing counselor. But if we had a testing coordinator, that would in effect free up counselors, social workers to meet directly with students, and would have the impact of being able to hire another counselor, or at least more hours of service. There are other concerns as well, such as the process or lack thereof by which mental health issues are assessed, and adding to the staff who can deal with mental health or behavioral issues. We believe that can be done within funding guidelines and in a way that will increase academic performance, both of which concerns we understand are pretty central to our school district. Appreciate the opportunity to simply express our concern and willingness to engage in advocacy here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it. All right. Thank you for the public comment. Now we can move to our item. I apologize for that mess up. So, Chair, yours again.
Okay. So today we want to share some key insights from the Citizens Financial Oversight Committee's latest review. Our mission is to ensure transparency, accountability, and how the district utilizes the funds from the 1 mil ad valorem tax increase approved under Resolution 2017-11. In my cover letter, I explained that the CFOC did not perform any analytical procedures to verify the conclusions in our report. We relied solely on representations of the district and the internal audit procedures of restricted funds of the district to compile our report. Our committee only oversees roughly 10.65% of the millage funds collected. You will see we have provided recommendations at the back of the report, which we'll go over. Ultimately, these recommendations are about maximizing the impact of every dollar, improving student outcomes, and supporting our educators. With ongoing oversight, we can continue making strategic financial decisions that benefit our schools and community. I want to give a thank you to Holly Johnson, who compiled this report. She had a previous commitment, so she's unable to be here today, and Eric stepped up to present the report. I do want to take some time and say a few things, though. You know how much I have a passion for this referendum, and I've worked tirelessly to have it renewed over the years for our teachers, staff, and students. So it's a judgment call for me and our committee to say whether or not the funds were spent in the manner the taxpayers intended, as our oversight capabilities have been limited to only what the staff deems necessary to provide to us, which is duly noted throughout the report. And so I'll let Eric take over.
All right, well, thank you all. Before I go into the report, I'm not going to go page by page. You all have the report, you could read it. More importantly, I'd like to discuss anything that you want to make sure that we cover, any questions you might have with the report as we're going through it. But I think one of the most important things for this report was that we really wanted to focus on adding the why behind the what. So putting in the different sections why the referendum exists, why it goes to specific buckets like STEAM or the teacher salaries. And that helps a lot of our residents, especially the new ones that are coming in, understand this referendum and this mill, why it exists. So I think that was an important part that we added this year that might not have been there in past years. Am I supposed to do a screen share on this?
Keep scrolling, I guess.
Yeah, you just scroll as you talk, and they'll put it on the screen.
Okay.
You're the driver.
Okay. Very good. All right. So we can. By the way, are there any questions or anything the board wants to make sure that we cover regarding this report?
Not yet.
I think we
They all.
Yeah.
Okay.
go through it.
Very good. All right. So, like Ms. Harrigan mentioned, what we spent the majority of our time reviewing is the 10.6% of the STEAM funding. So we received itemized breakdown of all of the expenditures that I believe you should have copies of, but
I
we
don't
can.
think they-
No, they don't.
No.
Okay. Well, we can share this with everybody. But that's where we spent a lot of time going through and looking at a lot of the data. Other parts like the instructional staff, ASME, paraprofessionals, we did not review any specifics with regard to that, even though that's a big piece of like where a lot of the funding goes. What I want to do is call out a few things on this report that while we have data in there, we feel like there could be some more clarity with what we received from the school district so that it provides more benefit to you all and to the public. If you go to page 8, we have a section that has year-over-year retention of instructional teachers. And what you can see is we retained in 2023-2024 101%, 0.53, right? From one year to the next, which doesn't really make sense with what we were trying to achieve. What we were trying to show with the data that we were hoping to receive is how many teachers were there in 2023 that came back for 2024, right? That number should not be over 100%. The goal is that, since part of this mill, the substantial majority of this referendum is supposed to go towards teacher salaries to retain and to recruit good teachers for our students. We were not able to show how many were able to stay from one year to the next. So next year we would like to see if we can get solid data of who was a teacher in 2024 that came back in 2025. Okay, it shouldn't really be over 100%. That makes sense. Yes?
Are you asking for specifics as to names?
No, I think
Okay,
if we
good.
just knew that, we had X number of teachers that were working in 2024, and of those teachers, how many of them came back in the next year, I think that would suffice. It would help us show our turnover rate.
Go ahead.
I think what the idea of this is, in the past, it's been tracked by, we have so many seats for teachers by vacancies. And if that vacancy was filled, they didn't count that as a turnover. They just counted that as a vacancy filled. So I think that's where a lot of the discussion was about that when we talked about retention. You can have 100 openings, but if you keep 100 employees, it doesn't tell you how many left and how many were new. You know, it just tells you you had 100 teachers and you kept 100. So I think that's probably, am I correct in understanding that, Treasurer?
It's exactly right. So
Okay.
teachers come and go, and if they're there one year and they're not there the next year, we want to be able to account for that properly, and then hopefully get to the why behind the what on that too. And I'll get to that in the next section. But yeah, you're right.
And some of them do change positions. So some might be promoted to a principal or something.
Right.
So they really didn't leave, but yet
There's a vacancy.
we have a teacher vacancy.
Okay, but if they transfer from, school A to school B,
I don't think that's a churn. That's not a turnover. That's they're staying within the district. That's a good
okay,
thing.
so you're looking specifically within the district, not within schools.
Yeah, in my mind, I think that what we want to show, since the referendum calls for the 51% or 50% going towards teacher salaries for retention and recruitment, are we retaining those teachers?
Okay.
And so showing that percentage that go from one year to the next is important.
Yeah.
Check out one thing real quick. Would a better way to measure be, this is still, what I'm going to say is still not going to get to what you're getting at, but on July 1, we have this many vacancies, teaching vacancies. July 1, 2025, we have this many vacancies. That's not going to get to drill down to the whys of why we are or not retaining, but do you feel like that might help provide some clarity?
Here, right? This is staff, no, that's all
I
staff.
think that's what they're
We
doing.
kind of did that there.
Yeah, I think for me, the vacancies shows another side of the same coin, right? What I think is important in my mind is who was there and who left the next year, who did not return the next year. You're obviously filling it with new teachers. You might have new vacancies for new positions, but we want to know who's staying, and is it satisfying the retention piece of the referendum? Right?
Which is a judgment call, which would be different from person to person.
100%. And that gets to my next point, which I'll get to in terms of the why behind the what. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to jump in. I mean,
Yeah.
I'll let you go ahead and jump in. That's
Yeah, go ahead.
so. If you go back in reverse time and go back to 2018 when this was originally implemented, we were losing teachers, and we knew where they were going. They were going to Sarasota to get paid more.
Right.
Now they can't. I mean, I guess my thought process of like the retaining, and maybe it's different verbiage. I know you guys talk about this at the end, at the end of the report. But like Mr. Kennedy said, I don't know that we're going to be able to get the data, but even ask the teachers. They're going to have to tell us whatever. But if it's I don't know if that value shows. Even if we're, let's say, 100 teachers we didn't retain from year to year, right? They're not in the district anymore for whatever reason. I don't know if that's going to show is the referendum working or not.
No.
Because 50 of them out of those 100 could be because my husband got it or my spouse got a job somewhere else, right? So, and that's even if we get the data, we're going to ask them to get the data, right? Now, when I left teaching, I would have told them what I was doing. Like I wasn't angrily leaving, whatever, wasn't fired. So like
Right.
I would have said, hey, I'm doing X, Y, Z, but I don't know that that's going to be the case for everybody. But we've been talking about this since 2021, since I've been on the board. We've been, the CFOG's been asking, how do we look at this, et cetera. And to be honest with you, I mean, I just don't know about, I know I'm getting into too much maybe. So I'll just, because I know one of your recommendations I think is good is changing the word potentially. But I think this is something like that I highly doubt now we are losing teachers because of pay. And that's what we were doing in 2018.
Right.
Prior to that, I mean.
Right.
So I mean, I see what you guys are definitely asking, and I'm sure there could be some kind of exit interview, whatever, like an email sent out, and maybe there already is.
There is.
And they may or may not respond to that. And I don't know where that data goes once we get the response. But yeah, I mean,
If
I still don't think it's going to give us all the answers. 100 left out of the how many we have. We only lost 100, or we did lose 100. And then we're going to go through that data and say, oh, well, 90% 90 of them left because of anything not related to the millage.
Right.
You know what I mean? So that would mean that they would say my pay. Well, if they said my pay because I'm going to go leave and become the CFO of a company, well, we can't compete with that. So I don't know. It's just kind of yeah. I mean, I just don't know where we're. It's just kind of hard because I get what we're trying to the number. I just don't know if it's going to really reflect anything of how valuable the referendum's been or not on retaining teachers. You know what I mean?
It makes a lot of sense what you're saying.
And I think the reason that we're trying to track it is because it is in the language.
Yep.
To recruit and retain. So we're
Sure.
trying to see if we really
Sure.
are retaining.
And that's why I think some of the at the end, like the recommendations maybe change something like that. Yeah.
And I think that's going down to your next little chart. I don't want to get ahead of you, but if you look at how could you have 101% retention, yet you had 459 teachers leave. So I think that's where the miscalc is. I'll let you go ahead and speak to that, but that's what I saw when this report was done. I'm like, okay, this doesn't make sense. How can you have 101.53% retention when you had 459 that left the district? And we have to understand too, positions might have been added, some might have been taken out or whatever.
Right.
That's all well and good. We're not going to be 100% retained
Right.
at any given time, in my opinion. And the way this is, since 2019 to 2024, it's been, you've had 100 seats open, you kept 100 seats filled. That's how it's always been measured, and I think this committee has been evolving into more turnover, and this is why they added this whys. Why did they leave category? So I'll let you go ahead. I just wanted to
Thank
put
you.
that out there.
Yeah, and so what I want to point out is, you know, it makes sense how you have the seats, number of seats filled, but we have a dynamic school district that's adding schools, adding new classrooms, adding new teachers, right? So that's a moving target. And showing retention of people who were there before, who came back the next year, shows some kind of data towards continuity, right? Which can speak to retention. To your point, Mr. Cho, you're not going to know the why behind the what. That's why you need to have that exit interview. And it sounds like someone is collecting some sort of data on that. I've heard mixed things if we're getting that data, it's useful. Even if they are saying they're not leaving because of pay, then that's a great data point that we can share with the public that says the mill is serving its purpose by giving teachers enough salary that's not a reason why they're leaving, right? So having that why behind the what that we can share in the future for the public, I think is useful.
So when I left, I had a list.
Mm.
Oh,
I had like 5 things, 5 reasons why I left. So which one would you like?
all of them.
I think all of, I mean, to be
because
honest,
that's going to affect your data too.
Sure.
If somebody's leaving because I just can't do this anymore, I hate children, versus somebody who's leaving because of A, B, C, and D, it's gonna mess with your data as well.
100%. Like life is complicated, data can be complicated, reasons people do all sorts of stuff is complicated. But having the data is better than not having the data.
And with regards to exit interview, I don't think I actually did one. Yeah, I mean, the poll, I don't think I actually did it, but I came and stood before the board and told them why I was quitting.
Right.
But I didn't do the poll. I know several of my colleagues who left the same year I didn't do the poll as well. So, trying to make people who are leaving for whatever reason do an exit poll is going to be difficult. And I'm telling you this from personal experience.
Sure.
I'm not making excuses. I'm telling you this from personal experience.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know how we or the district can guarantee you that information.
459 people answered
Yeah,
in 2023.
yeah,
That's all.
yeah. So,
That's the number of answers we got.
How many left?
yeah, so, I
Well, there's
and
the
I
data
get
on there
it.
is leaving. I mean, 459 all left, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
So
that was given.
54
to
were
them by
non-renewals,
HR.
70 were retirement, 4 were death, 4 were certification. So if that's the poll, then what we want to know is, and what you all want to know, but
This was-
data is not the retirement, like, okay, whatever, it's the resignation. Like, you, 311 resigned. Why'd you resign?
Precisely.
Right.
And that's the question. I think so. I don't know. The poll is like a click on what you did, why you left, is what it seems like. It's just kind of easy like that. I mean, why'd you retire? Well, I'm 65 years old. Like, I mean, I don't think that matters in the grand scheme. But the resignations, absolutely, right?
Right.
Non-renewals are going to be for whatever reason. But I think the resignations is the number of why are you resigning, right? Like, why are you leaving?
Precisely.
And if we can possibly get that, I mean, that'd be great. Sure, we can set something up that they give that. We may not get that data. You know what I mean?
They may refuse.
But they may not do it. But
We'll continue to try to keep drilling down and get to the best data we can on this resignation line there.
Yeah.
And find out where
you
the
know.
survey is going.
Yeah, yeah.
Where does it end up?
Yeah, if they give us a personal
HR.
email address,
Yeah.
it goes to that, but it's, like Mrs. Felton said, it's, it's not on their list of things
Right.
as they're, whatever they're doing, moving or whatever they're going. But we'll continue to, we hear that, and we'll continue to try to get to this better data point.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chapman. And I would say, even if it's not related to the salaries that the teachers are being paid, if it's something else, if it's one of the other 4 reasons or 5 reasons,
I mean,
whatever.
salary was on there,
Right,
but
so, okay.
it wasn't the key issue.
Right, but so if it's one of the other 4 reasons, having that data for you all might be really useful, because that's something that perhaps you can make changes to and address to try and mitigate some of the concerns of the teachers leaving. So it's useful, I think, for the district, for the students, for everybody. So, anything else you want to say on that? Okay. So before I go into what we'll talk about in terms of our recommendations, I just want to also recognize Mr. Kevin Chapman and Laura Cox and Silvana Aniska for their help as well. So it was really good to work with you all, and appreciated our collaboration. So thank you. So the CFOC came up with some recommendations for you all to consider based on our work. I added a little bit myself at the end, so I'll also share that. Ms. Harrigan, you can jump in and add color where you want. But first, on the last page, we'd like to recommend that we change the word retain to a turnover rate. I think that kind of captures what I was speaking about regarding who was there before in the previous year and who came back for the next year. It adds a little bit more clarity than this retained teachers, which has to do with the seats and whatnot, which is why you get a strange number. So we talked about that already. It's one thing I'd like to see changed if possible. 2, the intended purpose of the millage is to enhance and support the district's programs, and according to reports, the millage is used to totally fund computer purchase and licenses. So we were wondering, if this couldn't be paid for out of the general fund of a technology budget. Just, I don't know how if it fits under the STEAM section or not, but
Yeah.
it's something that we just weren't clear on. If that,
yeah. I think this was brought up last time too, and Mr. Dye, I don't know, maybe not last year. I don't know if I'll look at everybody else, or I don't know who I'll look at. And maybe nobody else remembers either. But I thought that I thought he opined on this. Can I ask you what, maybe this will help, what technology
Are they buying?
purchase and licenses? Yeah. Well, which ones are we talking about?
Well, they buy a lot of Apple products, iPads. We have in the past couple years, and then you have to buy the license for them too every year.
Oh, the
There's a
computer
lot of-
purchase.
Yes,
Okay, I got you.
yes. So they're, and it's not just a couple. It's it's
I read
a
that
good
wrong.
amount. Yeah.
Okay, I read that wrong. I thought it meant.
Yeah.
I thought you were meaning software licenses. So that's
Well,
fine.
we have rentals for software too. We do a lot of that. One of them is $27,000, just the rental for the software, IXL Learning. But it's all, here's more, $36,000 for software rentals. So it's a lot. That's just one in
Sure.
10. But that's what we thought. There was a technology budget, and we thought maybe that sort of thing came out of technology, since it was technology.
Uh,
Ladies first.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, it might be based on what they're using that technology for. If it's for a STEAM program, a robotics program, then that would go probably mill versus classroom computers, library computers.
And that is what it's going towards. It's going towards art programs, music, your WASED kits, and it's going to those STEAM activities that are specific to the millage. But again, this is a recommendation, so.
Yeah, so we can look at it.
Right,
Look
it's,
at it.
when, I think there is, at some point, there's gonna be another millage workshop to talk about the next budget. That's something that,
Yeah.
the district and the board can talk about as a recommendation.
You want me
So,
to do that?
and we could come back to explain a little bit more about what we specifically use millage for when it comes to the STEAM programs.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Dr. Faison, and then maybe even Ms. Sellers, as we talked about earlier. But, I mean, you guys are the experts on it, in theory, on how this money gets spent. So do you have any thoughts on the comments that are being made and the concerns from the CFOC? I mean, understanding a little bit how your spending and budgeting processes work, every time there's an expenditure in the school system, there's a bucket of money that it comes out of, and somebody makes a decision and says, this is the appropriate bucket of money for this to come out of. So the concern is that inappropriate buckets of money are being used for certain technology purchases, and I don't know that, Rachel or you probably could enlighten us a little more on how what the process is to ensure that the concern is addressed, or that it's not happening. Or anyway, that's my.
Thank you. I'll let Ms. Sellers start from an acceptability perspective.
Right. So Mr. Dye did opine on the capital purchases, so there's an opinion letter for that he gave the group. And while it is allowable to use referendum based on that opine for these technology budgets, their recommendation is that they would prefer to not see it there. It's not allowed to be funded by the referendum. So it would be, the board's choice if you choose to not, but it's not that it's not allowable. They would just prefer to see that, I believe.
If I could,
Hold on one sec. It was that, I just want to make sure your question was answered.
So the intended purpose of the millage, so the recommendation is the intended purpose of the millage is to enhance and support school district programs. I'm kind of reading out loud. According to reports, the millage is used to totally fund computer purchases and licenses. This should be paid for from the technology budget. So if I came to you as a board member, Ms. Sellers, and I said, and I made that statement to you, and as a question or a concern, what would your response to me be to assuage my concern that it's all being done appropriately?
Yeah, so the referendum isn't the one that totally funds computer purchases. We use other funds, other capital funds, to make technology purchases as well. So that statement that the millage is used to totally fund the computer purchases, there's other funds that do fund those as well.
So then, for the two of you, what is that address your concern, or do you still have other concerns that it's not being done appropriately, or?
I mean, that was just like an example. Like, another one is band uniforms.
Mm-hmm.
You all approve in your general budget to fund band uniforms. I think you do it once every few years or something. But then the millage also pays for band uniforms and things. So it's kind of like we're not double dipping, but we're both paying for the same thing. Does that make sense? Like, when I see that, I'm like, no, they just paid for uniforms out of theirs. Why, and now we're paying for all these uniforms.
Well, could it be that the millage is being used, there's a budgeted amount of money for that, but then above and beyond, there's an extra need for it, or would that be inappropriate? Like, would it be inappropriate?
It wouldn't be inappropriate, but I just,
That's the question that's
Yeah.
being asked. The question that's being asked is, should the millage money be used
when general fund money is already being
There, there.
Yeah.
That's the question.
You
That
could-
was a question.
Well, you could apply, I'll let Doctor just,
Yeah, I mean, I
but
think-
you could apply that to almost everything. I mean,
No, because the other things are things that the district cannot afford to buy.
mhm.
We would not have STEM programs in every single one of our elementary schools if we did not have the millage. We would not, because we could not afford to do it. So the question that's being raised by CFOC is the millage being used to supplant general fund money that should have been spent for the uniforms when the general fund couldn't pay for it? That's why the question is here.
Okay.
Well, it's
I-
actually in our 5-year, it's actually in our capital campaigns, ironically.
I do want to get these questions out on the table because there's this circulation of that's not the right word. There's concerns out there and they never seem to bubble to the top, right? And so if there are concerns that money is being spent inappropriately, then I'd like to hear about them, and we kind of have to do it in because I get it one-on-one, but we have to do it in a public forum. That's why I'm trying to let Dr. Weissong and Ms. Sellers opine and address some of these concerns that this money is or is not being spent appropriately. And Dr. Weissong, please go ahead. I know you have some comments you'd like to make.
I was just going to add, so I deferred to Ms. Sellers because different words mean different things. It's appropriate from an audit perspective or a legality perspective. We have many processes and workflows in place. There's not somebody sitting in a closet somewhere on Amazon.com just ordering stuff, right? I mean, it's all based on workflow. So there's not an issue there. I think this all speaks to the fact that all of our money doesn't go into one place and then we just pull out of one account. As you all know, there's money in a lot of different places. So for example, for band uniforms, you can pay for band uniforms out of your capital fund. It's specifically authorized in statute. That does not mean that you pay 100% of all band uniform needs based on what every high school band director would like to have, right? It means you're allowed to. So in our district, we have a line, to Mr. Choate's point, it's in the capital budget called band uniforms. It's a fixed amount of money and there's a schedule, and not every school gets that money every year because that one set of main uniforms is designed to last for multiple years. I'm sure if we brought all the band directors in, they would say, yes, we would love to spend more money on band uniforms, but every dollar we increase in the capital budget for band uniforms decreases the amount of a school renovation project. So then you go to general fund, where you have largely unrestricted use of funds, but everyone in this room knows the largest expenditure we have in the general fund is salary and benefits. And so we had public comment earlier about we need more counselors. Well, if I add more counselors, that's a general fund expense. And if I add more counselors in the general fund, I have to cut something else to do more counselors. So then we get to the millage where on the arts side, the decision was made to allocate funds to schools and programs and to empower those leaders to decide what their greatest needs were, right? And to then spend those funds. And so one school may decide we want a second uniform, or we're going to participate in this festival, and so we need a specific attire, and we need a charter bus, and we need this and that, right? As opposed to a team sitting up here and saying, each school, you get exactly this, right? So this is all in terms of methodology. And so the way I look at this is your independent oversight committee is given the board a recommendation. If the board says, you know what, we don't want any band uniforms bought out of the millage, then we'll simply go to the high schools and say, you can't use this money for this purpose anymore. Or STEM programs, you can't buy technology anymore, or whatever guardrails the board wants to put in place, we'll implement that. But that doesn't mean that the money will come from another fund to do those things. If it does, it means there'll be a cut to something else, right? So I think this is, to me, this is always about where does the board want to paint the foul lines, and then the staff will play within those foul lines. But that doesn't mean that we just keep adding and adding and adding, right? And you all know that. So that's how I kind of look at this whole conversation. And you know, we've had other conversations about charter buses versus school buses, right? We've had conversations about, different supplies, right? Some schools may pass costs on to families because it's an extracurricular. Other schools may say, we're going to cover that expense because we're not covering a different expense. Now, we can also completely change the methodology in the upcoming budget year, and we can say, okay, we're going to take autonomy away, right? And we're going to use the millage money to provide exactly the same thing to each school, and those decisions get made up here and not based on individual needs and programs. My guess is if we did that, you're probably going to hear from our employees, right? Who want to be able to use their professional judgment to meet the needs of the students in their program. But I really think that's what this whole conversation boils down to.
And that's what I was hoping, exactly what you just explained, Dr. Weissong, is that what may appear to be inappropriate, that's a tough word to use. Okay, I'm just going to use the word inappropriate or not correct, based on CFOC who are not expert auditors and don't understand the legalities of how the money can be moved around and spent and the needs of the schools, nor are we, the five of us even up here, experts on how to spend the money, what bucket it comes out of, what the needs are at the schools. It's very difficult for us then to start making all these recommendations about how this money gets spent. And if Scott Hansen, when he was here, he could probably enlighten us some more on, well, yeah, this is technology, but it's being bought for this purpose, and then Rachel could chime in and say, yep, and it comes out of this bucket of money because rule number 7 of the school board code says that we can spend it for this but not for that. And when we start trying to micromanage that from this level, I appreciate the recommendations, but we kind of talked about this in our board leadership workshop a little while ago. This is the good idea fairy, I think we should put limits on charter school buses, because I just think we're spending too much money on charter school buses. Okay, well, how far? What if they have to travel to Georgia because they're in like some super great tournament or a debate team? Is it 200 miles? Is it 300 miles? Is it 150 miles? Is it a certain number of students? It can only be 2 charter buses. It can't be 3 charter buses. I don't think we should be able to buy band uniforms. Well, okay, but like Dr. Weissong said, well, they have this extra special competition they're going to, and their standard band uniform isn't going to work, so they actually do need to buy $5,000 because they have this real cool opportunity to go to this nationwide tournament. I mean, I would rather he and his staff make those decisions and trust them that they are experts in, number 1, how to spend the money, number 2, that they're honest people and they're competent at their job, and that when we start trying to micromanage that, it will just create more problems than the oversight is worth. Because 30 seconds.
No,
when
you're, I'm just,
yeah,
for when
is
you're
that
done.
Every year that I've watched this CFOC report, I'll finish my speech in a second, I promise. Obviously, I feel a little bit strongly about this.
Yeah.
Is that every year that I see the CFOC report, it generally says the money has been spent appropriately according to what we've seen and what we have been able to look at. But then I get feedback from individuals, well, but they bought this, they shouldn't be doing this with that, and they spent the money inappropriately here, and they're spending all this money on charter buses. So let's either have a workshop about it and put all these guidelines in place and micromanage it, or let's just trust the superintendent and his staff that they're competent and they're trustworthy and they're doing what they need to do. And the CFOC can still do its job. And then I'll stop my speech, and that's what I had to say about it.
Mr. Brown,
Okay,
and then Ms. Felton.
sorry.
No.
I think it's a little demeaning to say that they aren't professionals. Leave it up to these professionals only.
They're not professionals. They're not, I'm sorry, but they're not professionals.
I
In
think
auditing.
Mr. Eric, I always say Mr. Eric because I can't pronounce his last name very well, is a well-established business owner. But we have to look at what the voters intended. Okay, and the mission of the CFOC is to provide oversight to ensure proper financial stewardship of operating funds provided by the 1 mil increase in the operating ad valorem millage, identify and measure relevant outcomes from the deployment of the funds from the 1 mil increase, and report results to the school board and the community. The CFOC consists of volunteers, doesn't give a definition of professional or not professional, appointed by the school board. Current and former members included business owners and professionals, leaders of the community nonprofit, retired school district administrators, and community activists. And I'm going to highlight "and community activists" because that's how this came about, was community activists wanted to get involved in education. And to do that, they went out and advocated to do the 1 mil back in 17, and it passed. And as we talked earlier, it passed at whatever percent the first time, a huge increase from the second time, and then this past time. And if you want to talk about consistently, they come here and they say, has been using it as intended, has been. Well, this letter on the front page says they were only able to see 10.65% of the expenditures.
That's because it's for STEAM and that's all they're looking, that's all they're generally looking at.
Right. Well, I'm just saying, I don't think the common person out there thought that the CFOC was only going to be limited to seeing just the $7 million that was spent on STEAM. I think the common voters said, hey, we voted for the 1 mil. It was $68 million. But the CFOC only looked at 7. And I understand 51% goes to salary and the other buckets and all of that. But that's not necessarily what, because I get approached all the time about, why am I seeing these charter buses going all over the place from school to school to school? Well, I give a worthy explanation. Well, you got a school bus driver that gets up at 4 a.m., picks up kids. They don't get home till 6 or 7 p.m. Who am I going to tell them to come back and pick up kids to go to a sporting event? But I also know that according to this charter and what the community gave us was a gift. And we are to be stewards of that. Okay, and I don't not trust our district leaders. I don't, that's not the thing. I mean, when they're making recommendations on, they see that their report, their spreadsheet has that much money in iPads and licensing. Well, if we pulled a report in the general fund, how much licensing and iPads are in that? I think that the mindset is sometimes, are we buying it all out of the millage and freeing up the general fund to maybe perhaps hire another counselor? I think that would probably be okay in my mind. Okay, we can afford to do this purchase over here so we can do this service over here. But the whole thing of this committee is to allow volunteers to come report what they see. And what they see is this. And yeah, their letter does say, you know, oh, they're doing it right, and, you know, based on information, on materially correct data. That means the data that they were giving given, that's all they have to go by. They're not the audit committee. They didn't have the option to pull samples like the audit committee does. It was discussed that they would have that option in July. That fell through somehow, don't know, but I think there's a little frustration with what their role is and what they're to report. And that's what our role is here, to listen to what they discover and some recommendations.
I have two things. First, I understand where you're coming from and that you want to provide oversight, and I appreciate that, and I'm not discounting that in any way, okay? But I also am, maybe naively, and you can say I'm naive if you like, I'm okay with that. Naively, I want to trust our teachers and our principals and our staff to know what their kids need. I was at Southeast High School, he was at Manatee High School, he's first leading at elementary school. We all had different needs of what we wanted. Now, I taught English, and of course, football coach over there, he's gonna want football stuff and your PE, and you've got your stuff you want, and and all those things that we want for our kids, so we can provide the best thing we can, and I want to trust that they know what's in the best interest of their kids. I want to trust our staff. I don't want to feel like any of them, from the district level all the way out to the smallest school in the district, are not having the best interests of our kids in their hearts. I don't have it in me to view them that way. And I know that there are things that happen that are not fiscally correct, and that there are errors and that there are mistakes, but everybody's a human being, and I try and look at it in terms of that. So, I appreciate the recommendations, and it will come down to juggling. Okay, if we take money from here, what are we going to have to cut over here? Because we don't have an infinite pool of money. And with the way the things are going at higher levels of government than ours, we may have even less. So, those are all my concerns. I did listen to the last CFOC meeting, later on off of the internet, and I know there was questions about, we wanted this, and why you didn't provide that, and what do we need here. But keep in mind, our staff is also trying to run a district, and they're understaffed. Their staff isn't getting bigger with the size of the district. They still have the same number of people, and they can only do so much. Mm-hmm. So if there's something specifically you need, please be specific in what you need. Which leads into my second thing. In listening to the CFOC meeting, I was very disheartened, and I don't know who was speaking, because it's audio, disheartened by the tone that members of the CFOC were using with our staff. It bothered me a great deal. These are hardworking people, and and I ask that you have your recommendations. This is mine. Is to please keep in mind that these are human beings. They're hardworking people. They work above and beyond their normal budgeted hours to provide you, to provide us with stuff. I mean, they come to meetings, and we could be here until 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night. And this is their time that we're taking from their families. And they are working hard trying to keep everything going. So I'm just going to ask that you please keep that in mind, and please be kinder to them.
Well, thank you for sharing that. At least I'll speak for myself. I completely agree with you, right? We support teachers and the staff, and you all here too, doing your service. So thank you for that. And it's certainly not my intention to, speak in any negative way to anyone. My goal, for me at least, is to add value to the community and to provide you all with insights that help you better serve the people that elected you, and for us to obviously keep educating my kids and other kids really well. So at least what I would like to say is, some of these also have to do with charter bus. So I think for me, I'll skip that for now based on what we just discussed. More importantly, I think what would be useful in this discussion is perhaps if the school board or if it's the administration could provide to us so that we can provide to the public in the next year's report, what are the parameters or the guidance that's given to schools when they're making the decisions to put to put stuff in the buckets? This way, at least we can at least tell people what those guidelines are, because I think right now part of the problem is we don't know what that is, right? So we just see the report, we just see things are being spent, we don't know what decisions led to those buckets being utilized. So I think that could be something that could be helpful. That's not in this recommendation formally, but coming out of this conversation, I think that's something that might be useful. One of the, I think, key recommendations too I wanted to add is, one thing that might be useful is, if possible, finding a pathway to getting teacher salaries being fully funded out of the general fund, so that the mill can be utilized for supplemental things that could be useful for the students. Another thing that I think will be useful for the board that we discussed was if you could give us all direction too, right? Give us instructions on what data, what insights, what things we can look at on behalf of, for you all and for the public, so that they know that their millage funds are being spent effectively and deriving good outcomes for students. I think that's important. I have spoken with other board members, and there is a little bit of confusion on what the CFOC is reporting or what the goal is, or what's the outputs that are desired. So anything that you can help to give us direction, we'd be happy to hear it. Of course, we're volunteering our time and we want to add value. And if we're not doing that, then we need to find a different pathway to execute this on behalf of the taxpayers. Finally, I think, again, we're not professional financial auditors, but if we could do a joint workshop with the audit committee to share ideas, best practices, understand how to look at data in different ways, perhaps we can provide better insights to you all next year. Finally, there is very few people on this committee right now, and I think it would be better for everybody if we had more people volunteering on this committee to give their perspectives and have their backgrounds add value. So I would encourage the administration to share with principals or through some mechanism to get to members on SAC committees who are already active, engaged in the community, to share with them that the CFOC exists and that we're looking for more volunteers to join this board. My wife's a part of the Gullet SAC. They have a number of active parents. With all the schools that we have, we should be able to find more than, how many are there? 3 of us? Yeah. So that's all I have to say on that. Any other things you want to add?
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll jump in real quick just on some things as far as the volunteers and things like that. I know we do. I just looked at our website. It goes by every 5 seconds on the website. I do agree. Maybe putting out other schools and things like that. I think that we've got a community of people, and when I say community, I mean like Manatee County, Bradenton, etc., that when struggles happen, we all get involved to help, right? And the audit committee was created when those struggles were happening, and people ran to, because the audit committee has the same problem with volunteers, right? The audit committee, CPAs that are running major firms in the county, ran to our aid to say, we will help, we'll get this straight, right? But now that committee, after a decade plus now of no auditing issues and no budget issues, etc., and now with a very good budget and the way we are, that's falling off, right? We can't, because I feel like it's almost like, we need to have something to help and to bolster. Well, it's doing fine, it's doing great. They don't really need that help. But yes, I do think volunteers are needed, for sure. I absolutely think, it's not funny, I'm not laughing because of that, but there's always been, and I've been on, obviously Charlie's on his second tenure here, there's always been this feeling of, and this animosity in the room about the CFOC and working with the financial department, and then coming to the board, and I don't know how you feel, but coming to the board with recommendations and different things, and I think the CFOC started, in my personal opinion, I wasn't on the board, wasn't on the CFOC, and I saw from afar, from a very negative start, right? So, and I think that from the jump, there was oversight happening to try to, like, gotcha, you weren't supposed to spend that on that, gotcha, and it's never I mean, that has not happened. We've never, the reason why me personally, I don't think that there's no reason 70% of this, of the millage that comes in, goes to staff, AFSCME, SAM, school administrators, paraprofessionals, and then almost 20 to charter school. The first person we would hear from that didn't get their paycheck right would be one of my best friends as a teacher or somebody else, right? Like, I wouldn't need anybody to tell me that we're not paying them right and the right percentage based on what we put out in the budget that they're taking X away, because I would hear it. But I do believe that there is a purpose in for the CFOC. I do not believe it's, and this is just where we have different, Ms. Sprague's brought this up a lot, like oversight, the definition of oversight. I do not believe that the definition of oversight is every month or every quarter of the current year, I'm checking to make sure, was this an appropriate buy or not? We had that in place, right? What I would like to see from the CFOC is it working? Like, is the data, and some of the data needs to be worked out, but is it working? If we're using money to STEM, right? Are we winning competitions? Are our kids getting into places and getting into schools and jobs and careers that are in STEM, that the STEM field, right? I mean, we just had a whole bunch of kids up here that are winning and going places, and you know, so what does that data look like for STEM, right? Like, what's our return on this investment? What's our ROI? We're giving this money to the STEM programs. We're getting that out of it, right? Are kids learning that stuff? Same thing with the arts. What is arts happening, right? Like, I don't think, and I agree with Mr. Tatum, that I am qualified to sit here and tell a chorus teacher or a band teacher or somebody else where they should spend their money if we're giving them an allotment. I don't believe that's the how, not the what.
The how, not the what.
So that's the how it's to be spent. Like, that is what we hire people for. And I think that when and I don't have any real problem with any recommendations. I agree with some of them, actually. The problem with the looking at did you spend this amount, this $10,000, did you spend it correctly or not? Like, I want to know, did we spend it to where we told the voters we were going to spend it on? Yes. If I was in your shoes, my opinion is going to be different than yours on should I have spent this money on the iPads or charter buses or whatever, because you all may leave in a year and new volunteers come in and they may have a completely different opinion from you all, from me, from everybody in the room. So I don't think that it's just hard for me to say, well, I don't think we should have bought that item. But if the teacher is saying, look, if I had these iPads in the classroom to do this project for STEM, we would excel, we would have kids learn, blah, blah, blah. That falls into that category. Now, absolutely, there's mesh points where it crosses over. Like, is that computer part of our normal computer stuff that we're buying, you know, for the classrooms? But if it's program specific and it's a software, it's a system that's program specific for STEM, I think the key is the money that was spent. Did it work? Like, did our kids go out and get certified in something they couldn't have before? Did they go and win competitions? Did they go and like? Those are the types of things that I would like to see. Like, what's our ROI, right? And I mean, there are some things. I'm just going to be honest. It's somewhat honest. I'm not reveal all of it. I won't reveal all my feelings. But there are some things that we are spending money on that we are not getting an ROI on.
Right.
Period. I do not think it's STEM, and I think the charter buses and things like that. Listen, yes, I was obviously a coach, and I understand the sports budget, and it is almost identical to get a charter bus than it is for a school bus, price wise. So to me, that's not an issue. If we're busing kids to go to Tampa, to hopefully go beat every other county in the western region in VEX, great, right? Like, I'll go get a charter bus and drive it. I don't have my license anymore, but I did, right? Like, I'll go and do that because I want our kids to experience that and win, and be competitive, and learn and grow. And so now, I'm not saying go get a 50-passenger bus for 10 kids, right? Like, yes, let's obviously have some common sense with our spending. And like Ms. Felton said, I don't think that our staff is allowing that to happen. I would hope they don't. So, yeah, I mean, those are some of my recommendations on what I would like to see from the CFOC. I don't believe it's not an auditing function of real time. You know, I know we talked about, we've already talked about this a little bit with the issue with what we were going to do with CRI to come in. But CRI's function is not real time right now, looking at stuff. And we talk about samples. If we got the data of all $7.5 million in STEAM, if we have all that data, like that is the samples, that is the data. But I think everybody's gonna look at it different. Like, should that be spent on that? Should that be spent on that? You're gonna have 5 different opinions potentially up here. And I don't think I'm qualified to sit there and nitpick what a band teacher, orchestra teacher does. I mean, Mr. Rudersell, if he was still alive, would look at me and say, "You barely played the trombone. What do you know about what to do in a band, right?" So, but I do want to be prudent. I want to be absolutely fiscally responsible with our money, absolutely. And so for me, it's more about is the money we're spending, is it working? Like, are we getting teachers from other counties because they want to come here because of the pay, the culture, etc.? Are kids being supported, and are we winning? Are we doing those types of things in the arts, in the STEAM? Obviously, athletics will be later. So that's something that recommendation that I would like to see.
Thank you.
Okay.
Ms. Fair?
All right. I like your idea of having a joint meeting with the audit committee. I think that would be value added to see how they function and how they pull samples or whatever, or work with the district on different things. I think that would be a good thing, just to see how it works. I've been to audit committee, I think 2 or 3 times maybe. And then I think the intent for this mill was to eventually pay, like you said, that on one of your recommendations, or I don't know if you wrote it, but 100% from the general, not a supplement. I've always believed, before I was a board member, and now that I'm a board member even, that a salary shouldn't be, or a supplement shouldn't be tied to a vote. I think that puts too much stress on our staff. I don't care what level you're at. That's just a lot of stress. If I saw 100% of salaries being paid out of the general, and then I saw 100% of the computers and licensing being paid from the millage to enhance those, all these other programs that we have, I think that would be a better, not, I don't want to say a source, but a better sell. That we're 100% paying our teachers out of our general fund and our whatever category you're in. That would be a good sell, because now you're saying their payroll is the priority. Keeping it, you wouldn't have that fear every 4 years. And you wouldn't have the cost. I mean, you would still have to go out and say we need the millage, because this program, to your point, your ROI, it's working. Look how many kids are, wait till we have the Boys and Girl Clubs Youth of the Years come in, and you'll see how advanced our kids are getting. And then, in tracking the graduation rate, we watch that, you know, so that's your ROI right there. But, and then, I think to the point that we discussed about, real lightly about the charters, I don't think the CFOC has a problem with a charter going from, parish community to, you know, Orlando to compete in a sporting or what any other event. I think it's more the inter-district events from one school to another. You know, so that's kind of the thing there. I used to drive a tennis team around, so, and I used a little baby district bus, so it was pretty easy. But I think that's, if I'm wrong, then tell me, but I think that's the biggest concern is the inter-district use of, overuse even, I think was even mentioned at one meeting, the overuse of charter buses for internal district events. So, I mean, it's, what do you do when you got a bus driver that's been on the, you know, out in the route from 4 a.m.?
You go
know,
get a
so-
charter.
I know, you go get a charter, so, yeah,
You're saying that's what you do, like, we don't have enough
Right.
bus drivers to do our normal bus routes.
right.
Yeah.
And
So
if
what
we
you do
had
is
that,
Go get a charter bus.
and that was one of the things I think that I had talked to Mr. Rinaldi or Mr. Dr. Superintendent about, was creating a pool of individuals that would be willing to do these kind of activities in our district-owned assets, but then you got to keep Manatee open until those buses come back after the event. Then you have to have somebody to come in and clean those buses to be ready to go out on a route to pick up students the next morning. So there's that balancing act. I just don't think that it was one of those things that we expected to see as a community, and that's the biggest thing I get is, why am I seeing charter buses all over the place? You know, that was one of the biggest things they were shocked about. Why are we doing that? Why are we doing, what did we do before that? What did we do to transport these students before the millage?
We didn't do it, they didn't have any transportation, we weren't doing these competitions and things.
Right.
That's why we went to the millage.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Thank
How
you
did
for
they
filling
go
in.
on field trips, Chad? How did you go on a field trip?
I've always gone on a field trip, even in elementary, on a charter bus. 5th grade field trip to Tampa.
Well, to Tampa.
Charter
Say
bus.
you were going from Palmasola to Manatee High School for a field trip.
I can't remember when I ever did that, but I'll tell you, every single football trip we've ever done, freshman, JV, etc., been on a charter bus. Now, we pay for that.
See?
District doesn't
Yeah,
pay for that.
Okay, yeah.
But-
Okay,
but the
there's the
fun-
Okay,
difference.
that's what I'm getting at. Okay, how about a field trip from,
Our district was.
it was smaller, but, from Palmasola for 5th grade class to go over and look at Manatee High School? Would you take a charter?
I mean, I'm gonna take what I don't know, again,
I'm just curious, because that's what's happening.
if it's the same price or
I-
as the school bus, sure.
$100.
But I'm not, but again, I don't wanna get
I
into
mean, I
debate
know, but
on
that's
this.
just
I don't wanna get
things
debate on
people are
this,
seeing.
on that.
People are seeing that.
So
And then-
my frustration with it again is I think I'll be honest with you, other than maybe the 2 or 3 have mentioned it here, I've never once heard it. I've never once heard anyone in the community tell me what are the deal with the charter buses, other than in this boardroom from this like small, like honestly, I've never heard it. So I mean, I'm not saying it's not a problem. I'm not saying we need to look at it. Sure, if we can do a 10-passenger bus, do a 10-passenger van, like of course. I don't want, we should be spending money if we don't need to.
I think that's actually on here, is to use
Yeah,
other
more
assets
bus-
for smaller groups, so,
We,
yeah.
we've just bought some new vans, so that, we didn't
Sure.
have them before. We're in the process of getting some.
And I understand, Chairman, you want to get into it. This is a question of logistics. Those vans are doing drop-offs at middle schools as late as 9:30. And they have to be back in place well before 2 o'clock to be sure that we're ready to execute high school. And so your window of time to run field trips on yellow school buses has always been really narrow. It's very narrow in every district. And those times, while they work for transportation, don't often work for the schools.
So it's a question
And
of
so
who's gonna drive it.
right, and so it just becomes a function of the yellow fleet isn't an option. And so you either don't do the trip or you go to a private transportation provider.
Well, we only have 97 school bus drivers, and we've had to limit our just our normal transportation down because we don't have enough drivers. So I think if we had 130 drivers, yeah, I don't think it'd be a problem, right? Mr. Kearney was.
Okay.
Oh, okay, yeah, I've been waiting and I'll be as brief as I can. So Susan, you've been on this committee from day one, right? Pat, so have you. So we, as a district, I think you would both agree with me, are in a much different position today than we were in the spring of 2018, when we put this language into the referendum, the ballot language, that we would have an independent committee overseeing the money, because we didn't have the trust built up with the community that we have today. And that can be seen in the vote total. We went from 50.5% in 2018 to 80% last November. So while we will always need oversight, and that's what I'll finish with, is how I think we should go forward. But this committee has all the twists and turns this committee has gone through. Remember, we started with what, 21 members or something?
17, yeah.
Oh, 17? Okay, it was a lot. And now we're at 3, which I think kind of reflects that difficulty in recruiting CFOC members, because there is this sentiment in this community that, like, the school district is good stewards of our funds and we can trust them, and that time in this district's past is behind us. And so I think, like, this debate we're having right now, we've been having since the beginning, haven't we? I mean, like, what do we measure? How do we measure it? And here we are, like, this many years later, and we still haven't nailed down how do we measure year to year? And so, and that's no one's fault. It's just, this has been a tough question to wrestle with. And so let me say this first. I think on the recommendations page, there is some good stuff here that an independent group of citizens has identified as, like, hey, here are things that the board and or the superintendent and administration should take a look at. And then we've heard that debate and discussion now. So I do appreciate that look. And it looks like you are going through individual budget strings out of these buckets of money, which technically I think is a solid way to do this work. But I want to go back to the first page of discussions and recommendations, and right at the end. Second to last paragraph. It is recommended that the committee be permitted to use the school board's internal auditors to conduct specific testing on the millage funds and verification of expense allocation. I'm only speaking for myself, not for the board, but I think that's exactly the way we need to go, is we need to bring this into the audit committee. This is work that they already do. I know there is a difference, I don't really say a difference of opinion, but there's a debate about how we do this. Real-time auditing versus after the close of books auditing. I know there's different feelings on how we do that. But we seem to be struggling with real-time auditing, and I'm kind of wrestling with this as I'm talking. But I would support if the CFOC votes as a committee that you'd like to continue to be part of this through the audit committee, and not like you would have to sit through every single audit committee, because there's a lot of work that they do. This would just be one slice of their work. And you wanted to contribute to that, I would be totally supportive of that. But I think bigger picture going forward, because we have this trust buildup and we have this audit infrastructure that's been in place for over 10 years now and is working very fluidly, that we bring the work of the CFOC into the audit committee umbrella. And I'm not saying I'm sitting here wanting to disband your committee or dismiss your work, but I think it needs to go there. And I would hope it goes there with you.
Not me.
Oh, if you choose, sorry, Susan.
No.
If you choose to. But this is still an important function, and I really do appreciate, because I'm new getting back on, and I did, like Heather said, I did listen to the last meeting. And to the two of you, I want to say that I totally respect your professionalism. I'll just leave it at that. I too was a little troubled by the tone, but that didn't come from either one of you two. And so I appreciate just listening, but I admire your professionalism, and you are asking tough questions, and you're trying to sort through this work very diligently. But I think as we go forward into our next fiscal year, I think this work would be best left for the audit committee. Just my,
So just to jump in real quick,
I'm done.
we did, as a board before you guys came on, we did approve that next year's, not this report, because they were already doing it, but next year's report, that we allocate funds that at the time, the CRI, now it's not, right? It's
RSM.
RSM.
RSM. Another acronym. So that they would have inside of our engagement letter, there will be money there to do that auditing side, just like they do for the half-cent sales tax.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So that same thing, to be able to do that for the referendum.
Yeah.
So we did not. It wasn't for this report that they're doing now. It's for 24-25.
July. Oh, okay.
So it'll start in that next year's engagement.
Oh, of course, because this is for the close of
Last.
23-24.
Correct.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So just let you know, that is 100% happening.
Okay.
They're going to have that capability to be able to have them come in and audit.
It'll be in the audit plan. There'll be some hours
in
set
the
aside for
engagement.
this work.
Correct.
Yeah.
For them, just like there is for like the half-cent sales tax, et cetera.
Okay. And so they're. Okay, no, that's fine.
But-
I appreciate that.
Real quick to your point,
And that's the last year of this current referendum.
correct, yeah, next year's referendum is a whole different thing.
That-
Yeah,
that's-
correct,
That's the last year of the current.
correct, yeah.
But Chad, if I may, the referendum vote that was just held in November, it still has that oversight language.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but the pies, et cetera, is all, like, it's open.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah,
That's all
change.
different. Yeah.
I will, to your point about the combining the two, I think that, I don't think it's a bad idea to look into, to see how it would work, and you bring in the CFOC. What I would suggest is another workshop, where we bring in the CFOC and the audit, and you see how that functioning works, with maybe with RSM possibly, or, I guess, although they're not getting paid yet, but to come in, but, to see how that would work, that function would work. Not only, and I would say from a body standpoint, like both together, I think is 6 or 7 people, like combined audit, combined charter. So the CFOC was 3, plus I think there's only 4 now that Ms. Foreman. I mean, but
Well-
just body wise, that it makes sense, right, to combine the two. And that doesn't mean that the
7.
CFOC,
Yeah.
7.
We have,
Yeah.
yeah.
Vote.
It doesn't matter that, it doesn't mean that CFOC has to mess with anything that the audit, you know what I mean? Like, they don't have to get into the internal, extra, they don't have to get into all that. But at least it's a function that's happening all together based on what RSM is doing, you know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah, I agree.
I was actually on to speak
Oh,
next.
Oh, sorry.
But you guys have pretty much covered everything I wanted to say. I did just want to add just one last thing, that there are recommendations here, like everyone else has said, that I do support and I do think are good recommendations. So I want you to understand that I do appreciate what you do, and that there is good coming out of this. I just wanted to add that. And then they said everything else.
I
So-
just,
Oh, go ahead, Ms.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to hear feedback once you're done,
Okay,
what they think about merging the two committees after you're done.
okay. So, first let me say that when I said quote unquote, you're not professionals, what I meant there is you're not experts in the field of what you're doing. And, I have this mantra, right, you've heard me say it, Eric, is that try to be helpful, not to be right. So, sometimes I think that, and this goes to what Mr. Kennedy was saying, is that we haven't, and you kind of said it too, we haven't really defined well what you're supposed to be doing. You doing what you think is best for the citizens are performing like this real-time auditing function, like, hey, we want to look at this stuff and we're motivated and we want to look at it, we need more information, and we're watching it, and then that's really not what we want you to be doing though, right? We want you to just kind of have a top-level look and oversight at this stuff. And so maybe we haven't been helpful in really defining what parameters you're supposed to be working, and that's where some of this tension is you think you're working hard and doing what we want you to do, and then we have these meetings and they don't go well. So that's maybe on us. We could be more helpful by giving you better parameters, and maybe I'd like to hear some feedback too, as Ms. Spray said. Do you think you have a better understanding of what we're looking for? It's not a real-time auditing function. It's not a looking over every single expenditure, but it's more of a top-level oversight function. And it's really not auditing because you're not an auditor, I'm not an auditor. I will say that when Mr. Choate brought up the gotcha thing, that's where some of my emotional frustration with this whole process comes from, is that I hear that in the community a lot. Or not a lot, I hear that from certain people in the community. It's not a lot, like Mr. Choate said. And if you look at these recommendations, to some degree, some of them are what I would call gotcha type stuff. So you take number 2, for instance. The intended purpose of the millage is to enhance and support the district's programs. According to reports, the millage is used to totally fund computer purchases and licenses. This should be paid for from the technology budget. The gotcha is, well, you're not doing it right, and we caught you. You should be paying this from another budget. I'm like, how would you know that? You don't know the processes. I don't know the processes that well. It's like that's what Rachel does. That's what Rachel and her staff do, to insinuate that this should be paid for from another technology budget. Is we know it's being done wrong, and you need to fix it. So that's a gotcha. Number 4, look into the cost of utilizing district vans or smaller buses to transport sports teams. Okay, the gotcha is, hey, we caught you doing those charter buses going between schools, so you're probably doing something wrong there, like as if the principal at Palmetto High School says, it would cost me $200 to get a 10-person van and go from Palmetto High School to wherever, to Manatee or MTC, to take a look at what's going on over there. But you know what? I want my kids to have a luxury experience. I'm going to spend $1,000 on a charter bus. As if somehow these principals and their budgets, which are limited, are not trying to be good stewards of the money. Maybe they aren't. I don't know. But I'm going to assume that they are. Number 6, number 6 and 7 together, private lessons are not funded by the millage for any other reason. This is not a taxpayer's expense, and parents are responsible for this type of service. Do you have evidence of that? If you're going to make that insinuation that schools are using private funds, or schools are using funds inappropriately to pay teachers for doing private tutoring or something like that, please bring it to me, because I don't want that to happen. But
Well, you can get their quarter 2 report from Ms. Sellers, and you will see the names of the people that give private lessons here and the amounts that we're paying for those. And I've talked to teachers at certain high schools, and they're taking the children out of core classes to go to chorus private lessons. So.
Any thoughts on that,
I'm
Dr.
sorry,
Weissong?
but
That's okay.
Yeah.
Dr.
So
this
it
the kind of
is
stuff we have
here.
to talk
It's
about
here.
in a
That's
public-
how we know, is because we see it.
Okay.
Okay?
Dr. Weissong,
Otherwise,
is
we
that
wouldn't
going
know.
on? Do we need to look
Yep.
into that? I don't know. We need to talk
I don't
about it in this public forum. I'm sorry, but
I mean, if somebody puts the evidence in front of me, I'll be happy to follow up.
exactly. Okay, great. And then how about can we address number 8 real quick, Dr. Weissong? Use more state contract providers for supplies to be bought collectively. The insinuation is a strong word there, but what that would seem to indicate is that somehow the people who in our purchasing department don't know the cheapest way to go out and legally buy products, and so that they're not using these state contracts when they could or when they should. They're just taking the easy route and buying whatever's available most conveniently without looking at how much it costs. Any thoughts on that?
Everything depends on total spend across the district and what rules apply. And certainly there may be times when teachers need something and the turnaround is quick. And if you can get it faster from an e-commerce provider, then that may get used. I think I shared some, previously with the board as being a new teacher and remembering, the cost of running out and doing my own photocopies at the last minute because I couldn't meet whatever the deadline. Sometimes it's a function of time. But again, we can certainly sit and look at specific examples, But again, the purchases are legal.
So I guess I would just ask, if you guys do have that kind of information where you find something and you say, teachers are being paid, for doing private tutoring with millage money, then please come to me and say, this is, instead of waiting till the end of the reporting period, come to me or somebody and say that we believe this is inappropriate, and then I'll get with the superintendent and we'll look into it. It is just kind of, there is kind of a gotcha aspect of these recommendations, right? As if we've caught you doing something bad, we've caught you using these charter buses, we've caught you paying teachers to do private lessons with millage money, we've caught you not trying to buy supplies in the cheapest way possible. But I don't believe that that's truly the case that's going on, and there's not enough ability for you to understand all the processes and the procedures that go on to really understand, and that's why I agree with Mr. Kennedy that, and the rest of us, that putting this under the audit committee might bring it a little more within the bounds of something that we could truly look at and get some value out of, rather than it being what I would call the real-time audit function that you were talking about. I'll end there. I probably said enough. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I think these recommendations stemmed from seeing the line-to-line items by the quarterly reports. When Dr. Weisson's talking about the e-commerce, I think on this second quarterly report had a huge amount of one line item for an e-commerce. So I think that's what stemmed that recommendation. I'm going to defend the CFOC because I know how many hours Ms. Harrigan in particular spent on spreadsheets over the last 3 years, I'm going to say, specifically the last 2, going through the data and sorting pivot tables and seeing how much they've spent on this particular area, or this, even down to how much each school got in millage dollars, or received, I guess would be the better English word to use. I'm saying stressing over how much money is being used for this particular bucket or this particular project. And 2, working on getting the people to vote for it at the same time. So imagine the stress, seeing where the money's going, and maybe it is, in her view, wasteful, or it could be used in a different way, but she still was out there day after day advocating, putting up signs to get everyone to vote yes for it. So I'm going to defend her and not allow board members to demean what she's been doing, and that's what it feels like, Mr. Tatum, is demeaning. Like your opinion is, oh, gotcha moments. Well, in her mind, it may not be, or in Mr. Eric's mind, it may not be. It's, I have a responsibility. I was appointed by a board member in Ms. Harrigan's case, goes all the way back to 18. And yeah, it was during a rough time. I get to Mr. Kennedy, you were here, you know. But I do know that the mindset for this millage was to get teacher pay up and not out of a supplement and onto out of the general. That was the whole mindset with part of it. I remember those conversations. I don't think there's ever been a effort to not use the millage to supplement our teachers and staff. It's just whatever we get, we're going to give them. I don't think that's the way to go either, but that's up to everybody else that's higher pay grade than me, but I don't think that it should be tied to salary at all. Maybe we'll have that conversation next round. But I'm going to defend the CFOC wholeheartedly because I know the stress and all of the work that especially Ms. Harrigan has done since she's been on this committee. And she has a long history with the district. She's watched it grow from west side to east side. So she knows what's going on in the district. She's got a pretty good pulse on the taxpayers and their opinions of what monies are being used on. And I value her opinion highly. And I especially value her service on this committee and her efforts for getting the millage passed. So I just want to say thank you. And if you feel a little deflated, I hope that I can inflate you into feeling like you have value.
Is that what we want her doing, though? Staying up till midnight, looking at pivot tables and
That's
Excel
her
spreadsheets?
choice.
Well, that's what I mean, though, is that's not, but that's her choice, but that's not what the function is that we gave her. She is not an auditor. She's not supposed to be sitting there up there at midnight doing pivot tables and looking through Excel spreadsheets and spending hours and hours doing line item oversight of, was this money spent correctly? Was this money spent correctly? Was this money spent correctly? Let me pivot over to this table. Let me do an Excel spreadsheet. Let me analyze all this. That's what auditors do. That's not what, I mean, I thank you for working that hard, but that was not the intent, I think, of what, and that's why my point earlier where I said maybe we've been remiss in kind of giving them the boundaries that we want them to work in. We don't want them doing that kind of stuff, I don't think. I guess I don't want them doing that kind of stuff. That's not not the purpose of the oversight of the committee. It's more of a higher level function looking at some
So-
data.
Go ahead.
Okay. Higher level function looking at some data and giving us a general opinion of whether the money is being spent appropriately or not. So,
No problem.
I just want to take 1 minute, I'm not going to hold you up any longer than that.
Sure.
But I've been on CFOX since it started. And the only direction that the board has ever given CFOX is the
Right.
charter.
right.
The charter does not give specific directions, it gives general directions. Every time new members come on CFOG, we have to struggle with what is our job.
Purpose, yeah.
That's exactly right.
I know.
And how are we supposed to do it? So we spend a good part of our time struggling to determine what and how because of how we get our direction. So since 2018, if you look at how much turnover we've had on CFOC, you can imagine how much time we've spent discussing what and how. So, Mr. Tatum, you're absolutely right. Because the general directions that we've been given, we have been constantly churning about what and how we are supposed to operate. And that is why people have been doing a lot more work than perhaps they should, because they're serious about the charge that they've been given, which is to assure voters that the money's being spent the way they were told it would be. So that's the history of CFOG.
No,
So we need a
I'll-
workshop then to define the parameters?
I don't think this is it. I don't
No,
think this
not
is the
now.
particular time. But this, I agree. I mean, I know Charlie shook your head too. Like, we have never really said this is what we want. And I gave some examples of what I would. It's just one person, right? But I would like to see some feedback on if it's working and things like that. But the majority of the money, 18%, 19%, 20% almost goes to charter. Gone. That's an easy, did that money go to the charters? Yes. Check. Then the rest of that 80%, 73% goes to faculty, SAM, paraprofessionals, asked me, was that sent to payroll? Yes. Check. So then to the voters, absolutely that stuff's going in, because the charters would let us hear about if they didn't get their money, and so will our employees, right? So we know that's happening. So now that last percent, which is the steam, which is what we as a board said, hey, we want to spend this money, this after we did all the salaries, we want to spend this money. That's the part where we said, hey, we want a Citizens Oversight Financial Committee to take a look at this and say, is this working? But I don't think we ever gave them any measurables, parameters to say, how is it working? What are you judging and all that? And I will absolutely echo what Ms. Spray said. To Ms. Harrigan, to Eric, to everyone on the committee, not only from this year since 2019, I absolutely appreciate what they're doing. Like, you're volunteers and you're spending your time. And that, for me, just like I don't take the recommendations from the committee as a slight on me, I hope you all don't take our comments as a slight back to you. And because this is all how a working relationship happens, right? But I will definitely take on this as a board. I don't think we have set, this is what we're actually looking for you to do. We look at the referendum language. We don't really tell CFOC much. Then they look at the referendum language and the referendum says, well, it says to retain teachers. Well, did we? And then we don't really know because half of our teachers who resigned don't give us a exit poll of what they did. And then, so it's just, we absolutely have to fix this. And I think it's in another workshop that we can put together. And I think the audit committee, has to be there and things like that. And
A joint
we're not gonna be able to solve this today. So are we all okay? I mean, I'm gonna go to Ms. Helen. Anybody else after Ms. Helen?
I have one quick thing, but just one.
I just want to say also that I absolutely respect everything you guys have done to cover this because I was working in the district during the mess. All right, so I followed it from my classroom, and it takes a lot of work to be able to do the things that you do and to take the time as volunteers to do all of this, and I feel that it must be even worse as Pat was speaking, because every 2 years the board may change. And so what the previous board, before Charlie and I got here, the previous board's view of what CFOC is supposed to do might be different now that there's 2 new people sitting in the seats. So, and I was going to bring this up for another workshop topic at some point, that maybe we need to evaluate every year what we want their goals to be, because our priorities might shift.
Sure.
And that was all for me.
Mr. Kennedy?
Yeah, this is my last word. Pat, she took the words out of my mouth. This is I think, the ownership here is with the board, not this board, but previous boards that just didn't provide clear direction. We've been kicking this can down the road for years. And Mrs. Harrigan, I want to say this to her when she was here, but to Mrs. Spray's point, she may not be a professional auditor, but she has found or the committee has found what I believe are things that would be audit findings if this were a professional audit. And that should be noted, and there should be a management response to findings. And those would happen if we move this into the audit committee's charter and into their audit plan. I think that process would roll. Now, granted, it would be a look back, not a live, real-time look. But that's why, there's a lot that has gotten us to this point. But that's why I'm kind of advocating for we roll it in that way. And I do very much appreciate the 3 of you got all this work done. So, there were 17 people to do it first. And you even did it faster than some of those committees. So that's that, Chad. Thanks.
Did you have something?
Yeah, Chairman, I was just going to suggest, obviously, we will be bringing the board a new millage proposal because we have new categories authorized by the voters. That will come likely in April or early May. Right now, on my tracking sheet, I have that sitting as a separate workshop. And so as the staff presents recommendations to the board about what that budget looks like, that actually may be a good time then to start talking about what metrics the board wants And it's, it's complex because this is an independent oversight committee that reports to the board. It's not a staff function. But we're following report criteria, the CFOC is following report criteria that are years old. I certainly have thoughts that I have not provided related to how the monitoring could go better, because I'm not sure it's my place to make those recommendations, because this is an oversight of the staff work. But I think when we bring a new budget concept, that may be a good time to have those conversations, and we could just include that analysis of potential ROI points, and then the board can decide what to do with that. Obviously, we want to be helpful, but we also want to understand what the accountability metrics are, what the methodologies are, because our staff's very capable of meeting, those expectations. But if the committee isn't clear to the earlier conversation about what they're looking for, then it's very difficult for the staff to try to meet whatever those expectations are. But I do think there's an opportunity for clarity coming with this budget reset. Thank you.
No, I agree with that. That's a good time to be able to look at that and see what exactly we want. And Ms. Kearney's point, we have kind of kicked this, multiple boards have kind of kicked this, and there's not like a true definition. Thank you very much.
Do you have anything else to add?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just say a couple quick things real quick. One, it has been nothing but amazing working with and engaging with Manatee schools, right? From Mr. Richardson at my students at Gullet, their teachers, Mr. Chapman, Dr. Weissong being available when we need them, and when I've reached out personally. So we have a good thing going here, and my bucket's full personally, so I want to give to the community. I want to be helpful, Mr. Tatum. So however this board decides to align on the CFOC or whatever comes after, I want to be helpful and add value. And not because I don't trust the administration or the teachers, it's quite the contrary. But how can we just continue to be a better school district every year, right? So thank you all, and let me know I can be helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
This way down.
All right. Thank you, board. I know we had a good day of some team building in the beginning, and thanks to the CFOC for the report. Thank you to the staff, everybody who got all that together as along with them. Hope everybody has a good weekend.
Just one question,
Yeah.
and I'm sorry. So the report will come for board approval at the next meeting?
Yep,
Okay.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
on the 11th. Is it the 11th?
Yeah, the 11th,
Yes.
March 11th.
March 11th.
It's on the draft agenda already.
I haven't pulled that yet, so.
All right, everybody have a good and safe weekend.
All right.
Your turn.
No safety tips at work?